Welcome back into OneSoccer Today, and some music to many people's ears news was announced today. And to talk more about that, really pleased to have on the show today Victor Montagliani, Concacaf President and FIFA VP. How you doing, Victor?
Very good, Andy. Great to see you.
Well, it's great to have you here. The news is even better, talking about the 4-year cycle. I know you've been dubbing it the ecosystem for the women's game. It's a championship that's going to be included in that with qualifiers, an inaugural Gold Cup that also includes qualifiers. A lot of this acting as qualifiers for World Cup and the Olympics. Without getting too much into the details of those just yet, how long did it take to put this all together to get to where we are today for that announcement?
Well, the thought process started really even before I became CONCACAF president, I guess during my campaign, if you want to call it that, back in late 2015. It was obvious that we needed to change the entire mindset of the Confederation, not just on the women's side, but on the men's side, and to really talk about and put football first. And that was to have more games more often. And so we obviously did that on the men's side. We had a bigger platform to build on. And on the women's side, we needed to really devise a completely new strategy from grassroots right up to our top competitions. And so the process was to devise a strategy, but to also find a champion for the strategy, which is why we brought Karina in 3 years ago. We launched our W strategy at the Women's World Cup in Paris 2 years ago. And that was a grassroots strategy. And now we're obviously today and tomorrow, we'll be launching our ecosystem of our new competition, which is part of that strategy, which increases the amount of games by about 120% of where we used to be. And I think it's, for me, it's sort of, this is the start, really. It's not the end of really the proliferation of our women's football in our region. Obviously, we have a tremendous platform to build on. We have the defending world champions and now the Olympic gold medalists to build upon. But I think it's important that that's at the top end. But I think just as important is for us to build from the developing countries and obviously the countries that sort of are in the middle that are aspiring in a short order to be competitive with our top teams.
Karina LeBlanc, definitely a fan favorite, that's for sure. Let's talk about the championship, because there's going to be a draw for that in this weekend, and there's going to be the qualifiers that begin in the fall. Top 2 teams, that includes Canada, they already receive a bye into the competition. But what does this CONCACAF Women's Championship act as?
Well, the Women's Championship, which starts in November, and it will have a process in the fall with home and away matches with the countries that are in there. The top teams from there then qualify for the final tournament next summer, which Canada and US, as you rightly said, will be waiting there. And then this will qualify the teams to the Women's World Cup in Australia in 23, 4 direct spots and 2 that'll go to the playoff, intercontinental playoff. And we're hoping that we have 6 teams at the Women's World Cup, because that's our goal as a confederation. But also the sort of new thing is that we've always had Olympic qualifying in isolation. And now we've kind of brought that into the W Championship. And now the final game, for instance, at the W Championship, rather than just being perhaps a friendly with pride on the line, now has a direct berth into the Olympics for the 24 Olympics in Paris. So you need to win the W Championship to have one of the 2 spots. Then we will have a playoff between 2nd and 3rd from the W Championship later on in the year to see who gets that 2nd spot. So now the W Championship raises the bar in terms of its intensity and its meaning. And so it goes right down to the last game. Obviously, the semifinals are important, but also the 3rd place game is important, and the final is just as important because it means a berth to Paris. So I think it raises the bar in terms of intensity and meaningful matches, and this is a part and parcel of the evolution, I think, of where we need to go with our women's ecosystem.
It's so great because you're right. It really does give every game a meaning. There always is something on the line. Let's talk about this inaugural Gold Cup and the process to getting there and why it was so important for Concacaf to also have that on the women's side.
Yeah, we felt that, we had two competitions. We had obviously the qualifying for the World Cup, and then we had the Olympic qualifiers. And we felt that we needed to broaden the base, but also make the tip of it even more important. I just explained to you how the Women's Championship now has elevated. And we thought it was important to have a flagship tournament similar to what we have on the men's side. And obviously, if we call it the Gold Cup on the men's side, we're going to call it the W Gold Cup on the women's side. And there's a whole process to that. Again, there's a road to a Gold Cup that would be played with teams qualifying there. There'll be a direct qualification for the teams that have done well at the W Championship. The top two teams go into the Gold Cup directly. And as part of the process will be, other than the teams that qualified through the qualification of the road to Gold Cup into the W Gold Cup itself, we will also have 4 invitees from other federations or confederations, again, to raise the bar of the tournament and to raise the relevancy of it. So we're really excited about it in terms of having another flagship event. But also, it's not just the event itself, which will have obviously the top teams from our confederation and guests, but it's also more importantly is the road to it. And we have increased the amount of games in this ecosystem now by 120%. So now it's not just about the top teams having games, but it's about the developing countries that now have games, now have an impetus for investment in the women's game, and an impetus to hire, coaches, technical directors, and get their programs going. And there'll be a trickle down effect because, we have a U15 championship, which is attended by all 41 members. And it's fantastic. But now we have the narrative, but by this entry U15 right into now 2 flagship events at the senior level. And I think it really gives us the right relevancy in women's football in our region.
It's huge, ton of games. And you did mention a lot of the smaller nations being able to play in more games as well, not just the top nations. What's been the response from them? And what is the hope you have in mandating that type of investment as well, creating that landscape for these smaller nations to invest in the women's game?
Yeah, it's actually been the feedback has been very exciting. We obviously socialized it early on with some of our members at all levels, at the top and also at the developing level. And it's been very exciting. They're eager. It also gives a narrative for the investment, because it's one thing to say, we had the exact same issue on the men's side, where it was saying, well, great, you got to invest in the national team, but there was no narrative. And then we established a Nations League and expansion of the Gold Cup. Now there's a narrative to go to the corporate sector, to go to levels of government, to say, here is what you're investing in. It's not just about these, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 players. It's about actually where they're going to play. And here's a narrative. And so it's an easier story to tell for the federations within their countries to get that investment into the program, on top of their own investment that they're going to get from development funds they obviously get from FIFA and from Concacaf. So I think it gives them that opportunity to launch the investment into their programs.
Well, speaking of investment, as you know, especially in Canada, the Olympic gold medalist, there's been a lot of talk about a domestic league on Canadian soil. And I wonder how much of, a lot of these games and the ecosystem, again, that CONCACAF has now created with this 4-year cycle, increasing games by well over, 100%. Where are your thoughts then on that encouragement for domestic leagues in certain countries that don't have them yet?
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, Andy, I think it's important to set the right environment. And, whether you're a confederation like us or a federation, to allow the investment to come in. I think that's been done specifically to Canada. That's been done on the men's side, obviously. And it's also to be fair to the Canadian Soccer Association, has been done by the Canadian Soccer Association. I'll take you back to 2011 when it was not a very good World Cup in terms of the performance on the pitch. And the CSA decided at the time, I was at the CSA, to partner with U.S. Soccer, who were starting the NWSL. In fact, it was supposed to be called the AWSL, and I made them change the name to NW because national sounds better than American. And we decided that we would invest in the players that were going to play in that and pay their salaries, either subsidize a significant portion of it or actually pay all of their salaries. That has been ongoing since 2012, and I believe still to this day, the CSA still does that. And so those players were sort of able to play in that professional environment. Then what happened was there was further investment into the youth programs. John had put in his Rex programming. Again, more investment. And then also with some of the leagues that are spread up. I mean, you have leagues in League One in Ontario, for instance, in the women's division. With all due respect, is probably as good as most leagues that I know in the world. Yes, everybody talks about NWSL or the European leagues, but we have a league already. I know it's amateur, but there's a building block there. And so that environment has been created by the CSA and its partners to build upon. But the reality is, for a professional league, you need two elements. You need investors, okay, who see a vision, who see light at the end of the tunnel, knowing full well it's an investment. And like any investment, you're not going to get a return immediately. And secondly, you need the media to back it. And that's, I think, been the biggest problem in Canada is the media. The media has really, with all due respect, the traditional media has not invested in football in our country. Quite honestly, both on the men's and the women's side. It's been a one-way traffic. In fact, the CSA has had to pay in the past to put the men's games on TV. So the federation is now on the point. And to be honest, I'm speaking to you on OneSoccer. It took a foreign investor in media to shake the tree in Canada to have soccer on here. And so when I hear people say, well, we should have our national teams on that, quite honestly, the team deserves to be watched by every Canadian. I'm not sure traditional media deserves the team. And quite honestly, if people are really fans of the team, they should have no problem subscribing to whatever they subscribe to. I do it. And I think we need to be a lot more vocal as Canadians. I'm speaking with a Canadian hat now, not a Concacaf hat. And as you can see, I've lived this and I've seen it. And I think we need to rattle the tree a little bit and wake the media up. As I told one of your peers and your colleagues, don't ask me about a women's league in Canada. Go up to your boss in Toronto and ask him what he's done as an investment into our sport. And you'll get the answer, because without media backing and without investors, it's really hard to launch any league. And so it's really hard for an amateur federation, nonprofit, to do more than they've done, quite honestly. My hat's off to the CSA for really investing in the women's game over the last X amount of years. And our players and these gold medalists, and congratulations to Bev and the team, obviously, they deserve that. And so I think the audience, a lot of times it's football people speaking to each other. We're speaking to the wrong people. We're not the problem, right? We need to go speak to where the problem is. And I think that's what needs to be done. And I think it can be done. And I think the environment and the platform is there to be successful.
Mm-hmm. I like it when you wear your Canadian hat. Speaking from the heart, Victor, we really appreciate it.